Welcome to No Sleep, where the night never ends, and every whisper in the dark could be something real. Tonight's story isn't just horror. It's a memory, a warning, a door that should have stayed closed. So turn off the lights, put on your headphones, and whatever you do, don't fall asleep. I used to think horror had a beginning, an inciting incident, a first wrong turn you could point at on a map. But in my family, it seeped in slow, like mold inside the walls, spreading in damp rings until everything we touched came up gray. The day my brother Ryan vanished wasn't a single thunderclap. It was a silence that thickened and never thinned. He left for coffee on a cloudless morning and didn't come back. The police called it a likely abduction. The reporters called it a mystery. My parents called it a day like any other and learned to say it without choking. I called every number in his phone, then every number those numbers knew. I watched footage from the cafe door, Cam. He walks out, cup in hand, looks down once at his phone, turns left, sunlight flashing in his hair, and then the city swallows him. No chase, no scream, no angry boyfriend or debt collector, just a set of footprints that never bothered to touch the ground. The months drilled a hollow through the house. My mother quit eating by degrees, a spoon lifted and then returned to the bowl as if the air had thickened. My father learned the art of poring over nothing. Paperwork, bills, broken blinds, anything but the chair at the kitchen table that nobody would move. I walked at night because I couldn't sleep, and I couldn't sleep because the house trained itself to wake at 3:17 a.m. The minute a text from Ryan used to ping while he closed up the bar downtown, "You up, Goblin?" He was the only one allowed to call me that. When the nightmares started, I did what everyone does. I obeyed the algorithm, missing person forums, amateur sleuth discords and Reddits, and boards that looked like they'd been vomited up by GeoCities and left out to fossilize. Some were gentle grief junkyards, candle emojis, and thinking of you gifs. Some were bloodsport. Men with avatars of skulls and wolves drawing red lines on Google Maps, accusing my mother, accusing me, accusing anyone whose life had not yet softened to a smudge. And then, one night, I found a thread that hadn't been posted to in 3 years, and yet was at the top of the page. Threads rise for new comments or moderator pins. This one rose for neither. It was called Messages from Beyond, Connecting with the Lost. The header image was a stripe of static, like a television between channels. The first post was a dead link to a blog that never existed. The second was a user named EchoingVoid. Sometimes the missing don't know they're gone, the post read. Sometimes they're here, looking for home. Replies spiraled beneath it. Mediums advertising services. Bots vomiting phone numbers. Genuine mourners pleading, "Please, my daughter, her name is Anaya." And then a dare from a user called Skane. "How do you know?" "Because I am one," said the void. I stared at the screen too long, or maybe not long enough. There are moments when grief teaches your brain to unhook safety protocols and call it logic. I made an account with a burner email and messaged him. Whatever. If you're really one of the missing, prove it. Tell me something only you would know. I waited with the slack, nauseous feeling of a person who has just hurled a stone at a window and is praying it's a mirror. The response popped up in less than a minute. "What do you want me to prove?" "That you broke Ryan's nose during a Mario Kart fight when you were 9 and then hid under the laundry basket because you thought it would stop Dad from seeing the blood? That he forgave you before you forgave yourself? That afterward he told you the word clavicle just to watch you hate it? Do you still hate it? I read it twice before the words arranged themselves into meaning. The broken nose had been our secret pact. Mine from guilt, his from loyalty. The laundry basket had pressed little plastic diamonds into my knees. Clavicle. The word was a chalk scratch on the teeth. I could taste it. My fingers remembered how to shake. Who are you? I think you know, Void wrote. But names here are holes. They whistle when you breathe through them. I closed my laptop, opened it, tried to compose a reply that wasn't just a howl. Logic has to be a corridor, I told myself. Walk it. Ask what a sane person would ask. Where are you? A minute passed. Then another. I began to write, never mind when his answer arrived in parts, like someone was threading it through a wall. Here, he wrote, a city that looks like ours if you stand far enough away and squint, but when you get close, you can see the brushstrokes wrong. The sky keeps forgetting what to be. Streets exist until you touch them. Sound is a rumor. Doors open to the idea of rooms. There are no people except the ones who don't know if they are. My mouth went dry. Are you safe? No, he wrote, but safety is a shape you can pretend to fit into if you hold very still. How did you get there? He waited longer that time. When the reply came, it was spare and terrible. I woke up here. The next hours dissolved. We moved through old jokes to prove he was who he said he was. Mom's superstition about moths, the 3 dead gerbils we buried under the azalea, his habit of singing harmonies, a half-tone flat to make me laugh, memory after memory, cut and polished, fitting the crown of my skull with painful precision. He knew the scar on my left shin isn't from soccer, but from tripping over a sprinkler chasing him with a hose. He knew the name of the fake band we invented in 8th grade, Bone Orchard. He typed it as if he could smell the dusty garage and the borrowed amp that would shock us if we touched it barefoot. I tried to be careful. What can I do? Are there coordinates? An anchor? For a while, he said little. Then, they watch when I talk too much. Who? Shadows, he wrote. The custodians. The ones that keep the seams from fraying. They don't like noise. What happens if you make noise? He didn't answer for so long that the cursor's blinking became a metronome for my pulse. Finally, they rearrange you into something quieter. I wanted to stop. I didn't. The human brain can't resist a door labeled "Don't." I kept sending messages until the site booted me offline and my palms were stamped with the shape of the keyboard. When I logged back in, the thread had slid to the bottom of the page, where old threads go to clot. But my inbox had a new message from an address that was just a line of slashes and zeros, like someone had tried to write a road in binary. Do you want to see me? My stomach hollowed. I clicked. A tiny window opened with a live feed. It took the camera a moment to remember where it was. The image stabilized into a street. I knew so well I could feel the bones of it. The block we grew up on, but wrong. The houses leaned as if gravity had shifted. Their paint looked wet and refused to dry. The air rippled heatless heat. Across the distance, a figure walked toward the camera, with a gait like he was learning to be a person inside a person suit. Ryan. Everything in me started and stopped at once. I pressed my face too close to the screen. Say something, I whispered to a computer that did not need my breath. He raised his hand, and the motion made my eyes ache. It wasn't a wave so much as an imitation of one, like the shape of a memory replicated by someone who had never had hands. He smiled, and the smile had too many corners. Beside the stream, a chat box coughed up letters. It's me. I told you I was here. I typed back with the acceleration of a fall. Ryan, what is that place? Where are you exactly? He looked past the camera, over its shoulder, at something coming. The shadows at the end of the street grew tall and thin, and then tall and wide, like a film burned by too much light. They leaned into him. The screen stuttered. His next line arrived, jagged. They're coming. You have to help me. Find the door. The feed didn't cut out so much as it folded, turned inside out, and vanished. My reflection in the black screen looked wrong, my eyes farther apart than they should be. I should have called someone. I should have called no one. Instead, I scrolled back through every message he'd sent, stitching fragments into a map. He'd mentioned a place he remembered vividly, one he could picture even there. An old cabin in the state park, where we built forts and swore blood oaths we barely understood. There was a crawl space there, loam and beetles and the wet mineral cold of it. There had been a trapdoor, or maybe just a loose board we pretended was one. When I closed my eyes, I could locate every nail. I grabbed my keys. The house held its breath as I left, as if the walls knew a line had been crossed and were trying not to follow. On the way out of the city, the streetlights flickered as I passed, one by one, in a ripple that felt like being counted. The state park road was a thin vein through the trees, pulsing with my headlights. I drove with the radio off and the windows up, as if silence were something I could trap inside the car and deliver alive. The deeper I went, the less the world arranged itself into normal shapes. Distances felt mistranslated. A curve that should have been a quarter mile away arrived immediately. A hilltop that should have come and gone lingered on the horizon like a held breath. My GPS stopped speaking and then announced I had arrived at your destination, 3 exits too soon, apologizing in a cheerful voice that belonged in a toy aisle. When I killed my engine at the trailhead, the forest did not resume its usual work. No end-of-day hymns from thinsex. No wind dragging its knuckles through the canopy. The air was full, but not with sound. I stood there for a minute with the keys biting my palm, listening to the nothing until it started to feel like a pressure suit. The path to the cabin used to be a gentle slope, pine needles sewing it closed behind us as kids. Now it presented itself in segments. 6 steps of certainty, and then a blank I had to step into by faith. Twice I checked my phone, which displayed 1 bar, then no bars, then a symbol I'd never seen, a sliver of crescent, as if the network were a partial moon. A text bubble appeared over the lock screen, and I nearly dropped the phone. Stay small, it said. No contact name, no number, just the words. And then the message vibrated and reorganized itself. Stay quiet. Stay folded. I typed with my thumb in a clumsy panic. Ryan? The typing ellipsis rose and fell, trying to form, then broke apart. I put the phone in my pocket and kept walking. Because if I stood still, the forest began to tilt. The cabin emerged from the pines as if printed on the air. A hand-me-down from a park era when people believed that wood and nails could keep anything out. The porch sagged in the middle, the way a mouth does when someone can't quite find the word they need. The windows were opaque, with dust crowded into tiny landscapes by spiders. And yet, there it was, on the right-hand post where we used to measure our heights with a pocket knife. R, J, carved by our hands, the lines wobbly, the J too large because I wanted to catch up. I cupped the letters with my palm. The wood was cold in a suspicious way, like it had learned a cooler temperature I didn't know. The door yielded at a touch and swung inward without the courtesy of a creak. A slant of evening laid itself across the floorboards, and the dust rose to meet it like a congregation. It smelled the same. Damp wood, rodent musk, the swampy court of old rain, and under it, something else, metallic and thin, a whisper of ozone. In the corner, the rope we'd hung for a swing, still looped from the rafters, gnawed in the middle by a mouth that had never belonged here. The rug lay where we'd left it a decade ago, a threadbare oval mottled with berry stains in the shape of a shoe print frozen in time. I lifted it and found the square my memory had promised. We had called it a trapdoor, but it was more of a hatch, flush with the floor and stubborn against the crowbar I wedged under its lip. On the third heave, it gave with a damp sigh, exhaling air that had been underground for longer than my life. The smell drowned me for a second. In its center, a ladder descended into a dark that swallowed my phone's light and returned it as a rumor. Standing over it, I understood what Ryan had meant when he wrote that sound was a rumor, that things here stayed true until touched. Even my shadow refused to go down the hole. It bent above the hatch like a soldier at parade rest. My phone shivered in my pocket. Don't let them in. This time the sender field displayed a name, EchoingVoid. He hadn't messaged me outside the forum before. The text arrived in 3 pulses, each one colder than the last. Don't let them in. Into what? I typed. But halfway through the question, my fingers forgot how to arrange letters. I forced the message out and hit send. No ellipsis, no reply. Instead, the home screen flashed to a thread I hadn't opened since childhood. A photo album app my mother had abandoned when she switched phones. For a moment, it showed a grainy clip of Ryan and me standing over this hatch with a flashlight, laughing, and then the frame froze, and the flashlight flared into that same thin ozone white. I put the phone on the airplane mode and clipped it to my belt, as if a common sense could be fastened like a tool. Then I went down. The ladder didn't care if its rungs were there or not. They were when my foot needed them, and not when it didn't. The tunnel at the bottom was cooler than the cabin, by a step that made my teeth ache. The earth walls had been carved by something that hated straight lines. Rust glittered where condensation had redrawn iron into fur. I walked, hunched, counting my breaths. In, out, in, out. Noise, but the kind you can tuck into a pocket. After a while, a minute, an hour, the tunnel widened and then stopped. The door was not what I expected. I had imagined wood, bolts, a padlock fat with warning. This door had been made by someone in love with making, a slab of iron with carvings that weren't quite symbols, but wanted to be. They looked like annotations in a language that had tried to become pictures and failed. As I raised my light, the carvings rearranged themselves with the low battery patience of a slideshow, not moving, being remembered differently. In one corner, I recognized the shape of something impossible. A guitar pick we had melted with a lighter at age 13. The edges curdled like a cooked petal. Beside it, 3 dots spaced like Orion's belt, except there was a 4th dot where no stars should be. The door was telling on us. 100 mistakes and secrets we had scattered through the world were welded here. The iron had eaten their ghosts and was now returning them like receipts. My phone vibrated long enough to feel like a seizure. When I checked it, airplane mode was off again. I hadn't turned it. A new message from EchoingVoid was waiting, broken over several texts like someone was typing with their face pressed to a window. They hear breathing. Count out loud. I didn't want to. I began anyway, barely above a whisper, because the tunnel wanted sound the way a desert wants water, and I was afraid of what thirst might do. 1, I said, and my breath bounced back from the iron cold and argued with me. 2, the carvings resisted and then settled. 3, something in the dirt behind me rearranged itself into the idea of a footstep and then decided against it. 4, while you count, they can't rewrite you, the next message read, but it costs. What does it cost? I asked the door, as if the door were in charge of billing. The light caught on a circular depression at shoulder height, the size of a palm. At the center of the circle, something darker, like oxidized glass. Ryan and I used to press our hands together and see whose prints were deeper. I raised my hand without meaning to, and the depression refused me until I turned my palms sideways, aligning the bones just so. The metal was not cold. It was skin temperature, and then mine. The carvings brightened the way a fish does when it rises close to the surface. The tunnel tightened around my ribs like a belt. Behind me, from far away, the forest finally found its voice and spoke in the language of windstorm. And then I realized it wasn't the forest, but the inrush of something replacing the air I'd already breathed. The text continued, staggered by interference. Rules, I realized. Not laws. Those are made by committees. Rules, like the ones that settle into a place because they have nowhere else to go. Don't call anyone by their name once you pass. Names are handles. They will lift you by them. Don't answer knocks. Doors there open onto ideas that want you to finish them. Don't bleed where they can smell it. Red is a map. When you see the road with no shadows, that's not good. Hold on to one sound that is yours. Say it when you forget. Ryan's last message took so long to arrive that I could feel individual seconds walking toward me over the rungs of the ladder I had already climbed. It costs, he repeated. What? I asked again, and the iron answered by refusing to be iron. The circle under my palm thumped once. Not with a mechanical lock, but with something like a pulse. And then the pressure gentled. The door unlatched with a sound I have heard since in my dreams. Not a click, not a groan. The precise syllable of a mouth opening in surprise. I should have turned around. I should have run back through a tunnel that only very loosely believed in letting me go. Instead, I did the thing the story wanted me to do. I put my shoulder to the weight and pushed. The seam yawned. A draft touched my face, smelling like rain on a city that had never learned water. My phone displayed one more text, and for a second the sender name wasn't EchoingVoid or Ryan, but my own, as if the message had traveled a circle too big to see. Don't let them in, it warned again. I thought it was about the shadows. I thought it was about the custodians, the things that keep the seams from fraying. Only later would I understand that doors have two sides and rules work in both directions. The gap widened to the shape of a person. Beyond it, gray like a bruise and streets without people and houses with wet paint that never dries. I braced my hand against the iron, feeling how it balanced the weight of the door and the weight of me, and I stepped through. The air on the other side didn't greet me. It gripped, heavy, wet, and cold, in the way a hand can be cold when it's been resting too long on something it shouldn't. I'd expected the gray world Ryan described to feel like an echo of mine, a faded print of a familiar photograph. But this was not faded. It was overexposed, too bright in places. so washed in sickly light that the shadows clung to edges like mold, as if the world had been bleached and left to rot anyway. The street stretched ahead like a bad memory I couldn't quite place. Houses leaned in toward one another as though conspiring. Their walls had the color of wet concrete, and I could hear something faint. Maybe wind, but it never changed pitch. Just a constant low hiss, like a gas leak under the skin of the place. I turned back. The iron door was gone. Not shut. Gone. Behind me was only a length of cracked asphalt, fading into nothing. A slow dissolve into blank gray mist. I stepped back toward it, hoping the outline would return if I got close enough. But the mist pulled from my vision like a veil avoiding my eyes. Whatever rules this place had, one of them was clear. Doors here weren't where you left them. I dug my phone out, hoping for a message from Ryan, but the screen was black. Not dead. Lit faintly from within, the way a nightlight glows in a hallway. A single word pulsed on it in dull, white text. Quiet. Something moved at the end of the street. It was far enough away that I couldn't tell if it was a person, but it walked like one. One deliberate step after another. The hiss in the air deepened, and I realized it wasn't the wind I was hearing. It was the sound of that thing breathing. I ducked into the yard of a house I didn't trust and crouched behind a rusted swing set, my pulse throwing itself against my throat. The figure passed under a broken street lamp, and for a second I saw its face. It didn't have one, not a blank mask. There were eyes and a mouth, but they didn't belong together. They floated in the wrong places, sliding slightly out of sync with its movements, as though its features were trying to remember where they should go. I clamped my teeth together so hard my jaw ached. My phone buzzed in my pocket, and my stomach nearly dropped through the ground. I pulled it out with shaking hands. A message. Don't breathe when they're close. Another. They smell air like sharks, smell blood. I pressed my lips shut until my head throbbed. The faceless thing stopped walking. It turned its head, not toward me, but toward the mist where the door had been. It stayed that way for a long time, head cocked, listening. Then it walked on, its body bending unnaturally at the knees, gait jerking like a puppet's. Only when it disappeared around the corner did I dare inhale. The air here didn't refresh. It coated my lungs, thick and heavy, as though every breath I took stayed with me. I had to move. Ryan had said to find him, but in a city with no maps, no people, and rules that didn't want me here, find wasn't a strategy. It was suicide. I chose a direction at random and walked. My footsteps made no sound. My shadow followed half a step late, lagging behind me like it was drunk. The houses began to change. Some had their windows boarded, but the boards were nailed from the inside. Some were bloated in shape, like something enormous had tried to crawl out and gotten stuck. At one point, I passed a house that I knew was the same shape and color as our childhood home, but the front door was missing, replaced with the perfect ovals of darkness. Inside, something moved with the slow rhythm of breathing, though it sounded like it was inhaling the room itself. My phone buzzed again. Don't look in. Too late. I already had. The darkness in that oval wasn't just absence. It looked back. I turned away quickly, my hands clammy. Far down the street, something flickered. A light, faint and cold, the color of an old television screen. It was the only thing in this city that moved like it wanted to be seen. I headed toward it, though my gut told me that anything here that wanted to be found was the last thing I should be finding. When I got closer, I saw it wasn't a lamp. It was a doorway, rectangular, freestanding in the middle of the road, with nothing to support it. On the other side wasn't the street, but another place entirely. A room. A voice spoke behind me, not Ryan's. Looking for home? I turned. The faceless thing was closer now, too close. Its mismatched features settling almost, but not quite, into place. And though it had no expression to speak of, I could feel it smiling. Do you want me to continue with part 4? So the encounter with the faceless thing escalates and ties back to Ryan's warnings? The thing stepped forward, and with each pace, its features slid nearer to something human. The eyes locked into their sockets, the mouth centered. The nose seemed to sprout from nowhere, yet it still wasn't right. Its proportions were slightly wrong, like a bad sketch of a face copied from memory. I took a step back, but the thing's head tilted in perfect synchronization with mine, as if it had been studying me for years. Looking for home? It asked again, the voice wrong in more ways than I could count. Genderless, ageless, pitched like two people speaking at once in the same breath. I didn't answer. Ryan's rules were screaming in my head. Don't call anyone by their name. Don't answer knocks. Doors open onto ideas that want you to finish them. The faceless thing stopped just outside arm's reach. Its neck twitched. We can take you there, but the door will cost. I glanced past it. The glowing doorway was still standing in the road behind, framing that other place. It was too far to make a run, for without crossing in front of the thing. The phone buzzed in my pocket. I slid it out carefully, keeping my eyes on the thing's face. Don't bargain. Walk away. The message had no sender. I can take you to your brother, the thing said. This time its voice was closer to Ryan's, but with a delay, as though the sound had to crawl out of a tunnel to reach me. I wanted to run. I wanted to scream at it to bring him now, here, so I could drag him home. But my throat wouldn't move. And some part of me, the quiet part that survived on instinct, knew the moment I said yes, this place would take that as permission for something far worse than a deal. Instead, I sidestepped slowly, keeping my shoulders square to it, aiming for the narrow gap between two leaning houses. Its head tracked me like a slow pendulum. The longer you stay, the more you belong. Then without warning, it blurred. One moment 10 feet away, the next 2. Its hand lifted, long fingers twitching like spider legs. The phone buzzed again. Noise, now. I didn't know what it meant until I remembered the rule. Hold on to one sound that is yours. The only sound that came to mind was one I'd hated. The ugly 3-note riff Ryan used to sing every time I lost at Mario Kart. Without thinking, I sang it, loud and off-key, the notes cracking in the air like breaking glass. The faceless thing recoiled, its features rippling back out of place, as though my voice had peeled them away. The hiss in the air grew into a roar, and somewhere far away, something began knocking. Slow, deliberate, heavy knocks that didn't belong to any door I could see. I bolted for the alley between the houses. The world seemed to stretch, the gap elongating with every step I took, but I forced my legs to move faster. Behind me, the thing let out a sound like paper tearing and bone splintering all at once. When I emerged on the other side, the glowing doorway was gone. In its place stood another street, this one narrower, lined with buildings that looked half-built, as though someone had forgotten to finish them. The roofs were missing, the windows just holes cut into sagging walls. My phone lit up again. Follow the street with no shadows. I looked down. Every building cast a shadow, except one stretch of road ahead. It was perfectly lit, though there was no sun here, and the edges of the buildings along it seemed too sharp, like they'd been drawn with a knife. I remembered the last of Ryan's rules. When you see the road with no shadows, that's not good. The buzzing came again, a new message. It's the only way to me. My heart stuttered. Ryan? I whispered. No answer. Just the faint hiss of this world breathing, waiting for me to choose whether to step onto the road that shouldn't exist. The road without shadows looked wrong from the very first step. Not dangerous in the way of growling dogs or splintered glass. Worse than that. Wrong like a word you've read too many times until it stops making sense. Like you've fallen into the space between the letters. The buildings on either side leaned away from it, as if they'd been pulled back by something they didn't want to touch. The light here was brighter, but not in any way I could name. It came from nowhere and landed on everything at once, coating the world in a dry, sterile gleam. I thought about the rule Ryan had given me. When you see the road with no shadows, that's not good. And then about the message. It's the only way to me. He was either telling the truth, or something wearing his voice wanted me to believe it. I checked my phone. The word quiet still glowed faintly behind the most recent texts, as though the device couldn't decide which message mattered most. My battery read 72%, but the numbers flickered between that and nothing at all. I walked. For the first 50 feet, nothing happened. Except for the silence. The constant hiss that filled every other part of this place faded here, replaced by something far worse. The sound of my own breathing, too loud, bouncing off the blank air like it was searching for something to cling to. I tried to hum the 3-note riff, my anchor sound, but here it died instantly. No echo. No memory of it lingering in my ears. Just gone. Something was peeling the world behind me. I didn't turn around, but I felt it. Like wallpaper tearing away from a wall, slow and deliberate. The surface of this street being stripped back by invisible hands. My legs wanted to sprint, but I forced them to move at the same steady pace. Because some instinct told me running would make whatever was behind me finish faster. Then the first building on my left twitched. Not swayed, twitched. Like a muscle under skin. The holes where windows should be flexed wider, and something pale pressed against the inside wall, stretching the surface outward, like a face pressing into fabric. The face had no features. Just bulges where eyes and a mouth might form, and it pushed, as though it wanted out. The wall split. A hand came through. It wasn't a human hand. It was thin and jointed in too many places, the skin damp and gray. It gripped the edge of the window hole and pulled the rest of itself through. The sound was wet and papery, like tearing open a sack of raw meat. I moved faster. The building on my right shuddered in answer, releasing another one of them. A long, hairless thing with limbs like bent piping, dragging itself toward the road with a grin too wide to stay on one face. Another message flashed on my phone without a buzz. Don't stop. Don't touch them. Don't let them call you. As if on cue, the first one's mouth split open, and my name came out. Not my full name, not even my usual one. It was Ryan's nickname for me, Goblin. I nearly broke into a run right there. The voice was perfect, too perfect. It was warm, teasing. The the way Ryan used to say it after beating me at a game. And for a second, I forgot where I was. My foot faltered. The skin of the road dipped, as if the surface had softened under me. The second creature whispered, "Come here," in my mother's voice. I clamped my hands over my ears, but the voices didn't come through my ears. They were inside, laid directly against the inside of my skull. I kept walking, faster now, every step pulling at something in the air, like I was dragging an invisible weight with me. Then the road began to narrow. It shouldn't have. This wasn't a bridge, but the buildings tilted in, their bases sliding closer. In another 20 feet, the gap between them would be only wide enough for me to turn sideways. The creatures followed along the walls, smiling, their movements insect-like and jerky. I risked a glance over my shoulder. The peeling behind me had caught up. The gray sky had split open into a long, vertical seam, and from it hung shapes like giant, stringy shadows, writhing as if they were pushing against a membrane. Whatever was trying to get through was almost here, and the narrowing road meant I had nowhere left to go but forward. My phone lit again. No name, no number. Run now. I ran. The moment my foot slammed against the road, the air changed. It stopped being heavy and turned sharp, slicing past my ears in jagged gusts that made my eyes water. The buildings on either side leaned in harder, their jagged window holes shivering as the creatures within clawed at the edges. They didn't give chase in the normal way. They moved along the walls, crawling over the surface like roaches, their bodies bending to impossible angles, keeping pace without ever touching the ground. Every so often, one would dart ahead, peering down with those paper-thin grins, whispering my name, my mother's voice, my father's voice, each one perfect, each one wrong. The road narrowed faster than I could run it. My shoulders grazed rough plaster, and the friction burned through my jacket. The hiss that filled this world returned, louder than I'd ever heard it, as if my running had agitated the place into a frenzy. The seam in the sky behind me split wider. The shadows inside were no longer shapes. They were faces, massive and stretched, each one carved from black smoke, their mouths opening to reveal teeth too bright for this place. They pressed forward, distorting the seam like wet cloth, and each time their jaws moved, the air in my lungs turned colder. My phone buzzed in my pocket, a rapid-fire series of vibrations, like it was panicking. I pulled it out without slowing down. Don't let them take your breath. I didn't understand until one of the wall crawlers lunged low toward me, its mouth opening wider than its head, and I felt my chest lighten. Not in relief, but as though the air in me had been yanked upward toward its teeth. I clamped my mouth shut and forced a hard exhale through my nose, willing my anchor sound into existence. 3 broken notes, ugly and off-key, came out like I was choking them. The thing recoiled, its head twitching in frustration, and its body snapped back to the wall like an elastic band. I kept running. The light ahead brightened. Too bright. Too sudden. A door. It had no frame, just a rectangular cutout of darkness standing in the road. The air around it rippled, distorting the world like heat haze. Ryan's voice came from inside it. "Goblin, here, hurry." Everything in me wanted to sprint through that door without thinking, but Ryan's rules punched through my skull. Don't call anyone by their name once you pass. Names are handles. He'd just used mine. I slowed, my legs screaming, the hiss around me swelling into a roar. The shadows behind were spilling fully through the seam. Now their limbs dragging along the road, like they were feeling for me. The voice from the doorway grew urgent. "It's me. They're right behind you. Move." The tone was perfect. It was him, but there was something in the pacing of the words. Too evenly spaced, too deliberate, as if rehearsed. Ryan never spoke like that when he was scared. A new vibration in my palm. My phone again? That's not me. Don't stop running. The hiss broke into screaming. Not human screaming. This was the place itself, tearing its voice in half. The buildings around me shook, and the wall crawler's hands darted down like hooks, trying to catch my shoulders. I ran past the false doorway. Whatever was inside shrieked my name, the sound pitching lower until it was a growl that rattled the windows. The road ahead split into two. Left led deeper into lightless streets. Right sloped downward into something that smelled like damp earth. My phone lit up again, but this time the message was incomplete. Words breaking apart on the screen as if something were trying to erase the mid-send. Redact, do, don, door. And then, it's the last one. Costs more. I turned right. The slope was steeper than it looked, pulling me into the dark, like I'd stepped onto the tongue of some massive thing. The hiss faded, replaced by a deep, slow breathing. Steady enough to almost pass for my own, if not for the faint tremor beneath each inhale. The road ended abruptly at a low stone arch. Its keystone was cracked, the gap wide enough for the mist to leak through like smoke from a dying fire. Beneath the arch yawned a tunnel, the air inside wet and metallic, smelling faintly of rain on rust. At the far end of that tunnel, I saw it, the door. It wasn't like the iron one in the cabin. This was wood, blackened with age, its surface carved with patterns that wouldn't stay still. The lines shifted and bent when I looked at them too long, sometimes forming shapes I recognized. My bedroom window, Ryan's old sneakers, the chipped mug Dad used for coffee, only to dissolve into symbols again. My phone vibrated once. "Don't touch it until I'm there." I froze. The message was signed Ryan. From the shadows beside the arch, he stepped into view. Same hair, same stance, same scar above his left eyebrow from the time we'd tried to build a bike ramp out of cinder blocks. His smile was tired but real. "I told you there was another door," he said. For a second, the world felt solid again. My throat tightened. "How do I know it's you?" He shrugged. "You don't? But if you want to leave this place, you'll open it with me." The rules clanged in my head. Names are handles. Don't bleed where they can smell it. Doors open onto ideas that want you to finish them. "You used my name before," I said. His eyes flickered. Not guilt, not surprise, but something like recognition. It was the only way to pull you off that shadowless road. They'd have taken you. He stepped closer. "I can't hold this door open alone. It needs two." I glanced at the wood. The carvings had stopped shifting. They formed an outline, two handprints side by side. My right palm itched. My phone buzzed again. The message wasn't from Ryan. It wasn't from EchoingVoid. It had no sender at all. "If you touch it, you'll trade places." Ryan saw me reading and frowned. "Don't listen. They're trying to keep us apart." Behind him, the tunnel quivered. The mist at its edges was pulling inward, as though something massive was breathing it in. The hiss was back, rising, and the sound of the wall crawlers skittered faintly somewhere above. "Please," he said. And it was his voice exactly. Frustrated, Scared. Real. Goblin. I don't want to be here anymore. My chest ached. Every part of me wanted to believe him. The phone buzzed one last time. If you take him back, he'll never leave. Pick fast. The hiss was a scream now, rushing toward us down the tunnel. The wood of the door began to throb, the carvings glowing faintly, as though it could feel my decision coming. Ryan reached out his hand. The space between us felt as thin as a held breath. I don't remember choosing. I remember touching. The door split open like paper tearing in slow motion. The mist roared inside, pulling at both of us. Ryan's grip tightened around my wrist, not to hold on, but to push. The world flipped. When I woke, I was lying on the floor of the cabin. My phone was in my hand, its screen dark, except for a single message burned faintly into it. Don't stop looking. There's another door. From somewhere beneath the floorboards came a single knock, and another, and another. They're still knocking, and I don't know who's on the other side.